Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to season 6 of the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kayla Smith, a holistic integrative doctor specializing in fertility and hormone health. If you're looking for insights into hormones, fertility, and all things related, you've come to the right place. Tune in weekly as we interview amazing experts in the field of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're beginning your journey or you've been struggling for years, we're finally going to help you put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get and stay pregnant and eliminate all your hormone-related symptoms for good. Are you ready? This season, we're focusing closely on fertility and hormone health with an amazing lineup of expert guests sharing groundbreaking knowledge, bringing you stories and advice that will support you in your fertility journey. We're here to lift your spirits, give you a virtual hug and inspiration, as well as empower you to take charge of your fertility and your health. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being an amazing listener. So now, let's get started on your road to transformation. Let's start piecing together your hormone puzzle one step at a time. On today's show, we have Nicole Fennell. She's a registered dietitian nutritionist and board certified in functional nutritional therapies with an emphasis on thyroid health, Hashimoto's, and metabolism support. She is a mom of 3 and the owner of Choose Food Wisely. Since 2012, CFW has helped over 1,000 women optimize their hormones, energy, metabolism, and find peace with food by implementing personalized and sustainable strategies to make meal times more of a habit and less of a hassle. Today, we're going to talk about why thyroid problems aren't typically thyroid problems and what to do about it. So now let's welcome Nicole to the podcast. Hey, Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I know we were talking offline and I just love talking about thyroid. I feel there's so much to talk about and still so much nuance that we don't know. So this will be a great conversation.
I think so too. I'm excited.
Yes. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit more about you and how you got into the work that you're doing and why are you so passionate about what you do?
Oh man. Well, I'm a registered dietitian and I've been a dietitian, since the dark ages. So it's been a really long time. And, the evolution of becoming a dietitian, working in the clinical setting to private practice to really specializing in hormonal imbalances and especially thyroid has definitely been an evolution that has honestly been kind of related to my story of feeling just kind of lost and underserved and not really knowing how to take care of myself as a quote unquote health expert. So as I mentioned, I started in the clinical field, working in hospitals and doing consulting work. And I mean, hindsight's 2020, but at the moment when I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, kind of felt blindsided, like, what the heck? I'm supposed to be the pillar of health, as a dietitian. But I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's and not really given many options outside of like, well, let's wait and see until your thyroid gets bad enough for medication, and then we'll just take it from there. And I just was not okay with that answer. And I knew that there had to be something else. And so in true type A fashion, I dove into the research and tried to figure out how the heck to take care of myself. But also just having that intuitive pull that told me that our bodies are resilient and this isn't happening by mistake, but for a reason. And I wanted to know what that reason was. And so honestly, it was through my own journey and realizing how much this population is underserved and overlooked, I realized this is really a need. And that's why I decided to go all in on this area.
I love that. And it definitely is a need. I find so many times that either we're told our symptoms are in our head and it's not your thyroid at all, or we're thrown medication and sent home and said, good luck, and not even told maybe we need to look at your diet or your lifestyle or any of these things that we can do to help optimize the thyroid. So I love the work that you're doing. It's so needed. So thank you for sharing all of that. And let's talk about thyroid. One of our theme for today is how the thyroid is probably not the thyroid at all. So let's dive into that. Talk to me about that. Big picture, what is thyroid problems? What does that even mean?
For sure. And I think a lot of times people are a little perplexed that a dietitian would be focusing on thyroid health and like, how does like the math isn't mathing there kind of situation. But, I'm a really big believer, and this is not just a belief, but like actual scientific fact that most of the time when people are experiencing hypothyroidism or low thyroid hormones, that the thyroid isn't always the actual problem. It's usually something else that's leading to an underperformance of the thyroid. And so I operate under the impression that hypothyroidism is a metabolic adaptation to underlying root causes. And the root causes can be multifaceted, but I think that it's our job as clinicians to peel back the layers and to understand why the thyroid is underperforming. And even deeper than that, why the hormone levels are low, why the cells may not be taking up the thyroid hormone, why the cells may not be responding to the thyroid hormone. And so I think that getting diagnosis or awareness of some suboptimal thyroid hormone levels is step number one. But then the next close step number two is really peeling back the layers and understanding why. What is the root cause and or causes behind that adaptation?
I love that. And you're speaking my language. I always tell people when they come to see me, they'll say, well, I'm diagnosed with this, my thyroid's doing this. And I'll say, well, let's think about why is that happening? Let's fix why it's happening. And then your body is self-healing. It will heal itself and work to its full potential. So I love that you say that. And you also talk about how a lot of times we're misdiagnosed when it comes to thyroid. So talk to us about that. What are some misdiagnoses around thyroid that you're seeing in your practice?
Yeah. So, I would say one of the most common ones is just a lack of diagnosis in general. And it's oftentimes related to lab values being in range, but maybe not in an optimal range. So somebody comes in and they're feeling all the symptoms, but the labs look totally normal, which is great. Like, who doesn't want normal labs? But it doesn't really help move the needle in the right direction if you have these symptoms, but there's no action step being taken from that. And so that's where I think that root cause practitioners like we are really invaluable to this entire process, because we really can figure out why there's that underperformance of the thyroid happening. So I would say just a missed diagnosis, or it's not missed because that makes it seem like it's wrong. I think more than anything, it's just a lack of digging into suboptimal values, even if they're not overtly high or overtly low. And then I would say the second one would be diagnosing based just off of TSH alone, which can be a really, really finicky marker that is influenced by a lot of different values. And then third would be just not identifying whether or not it's autoimmune in nature. And truth be told, the medication management honestly doesn't change that much if you're Hashimoto's or not. That is true. However, the flip side to that is, as a person dealing with thyroid dysfunction or thyroid hormone imbalances, I think that it's really important to know if you're dealing with a lifelong autoimmune disease or if you're dealing with something else that's leading to your hypothyroidism. So I would say that would be probably maybe not the third most common, but among the top three things that would be missed would be an autoimmune diagnosis.
Gotcha. And so talk to us about some of the triggers you're seeing. What are some of the root causes that could cause this to happen in the first place?
Yeah. So I would say if you're thinking sort of like a tiered system, so you had the diagnosis of hypothyroidism, I would say the first step would be identifying, is it autoimmune in nature or is it not autoimmune in nature? I think that's really, really important because, again, the autoimmune side of it, there's going to be a lot of genetics wrapped up in that, a lot of gut health wrapped up in that, a lot of factors wrapped up in that, and that's lifelong. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be feeling symptomatic for the rest of your life, but that is going to be there forever. And so it's really, really important to implement a diet and a lifestyle strategy that you can follow forever. And so if it's not autoimmune, then a lot of the other root causes, if it's non-autoimmune related hypothyroidism, would be nutrient deficiencies, stress, gut imbalances. And so a lot of those root causes are shared between whether or not it's autoimmune or not autoimmune. But I kind of tell people that if it's Hashimoto's in nature, it's almost like root causes 2.0, where it's all of these things, plus it's your immune system on top of it. So I think that just brings a whole new layer of care that's necessary.
For sure. And talk us through how we would know if it's autoimmune or not. Is this through testing? Is this through blood work, functional labs? How would somebody know if they have autoimmune condition or not?
Yeah. So the gold standard, and I'm not a doctor, I cannot diagnose, but what I can share is that the typical standard of care when it comes to the diagnosis of an autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's would be doing lab testing. And these, I mean, they're considered standard, but they're just not often done, or maybe they're done once and never redone. But it would be looking at your antibody levels. So whether it's anti-thyroid globulin and or anti-TPO, those would be the most common ones that would be utilized for the diagnosis of autoimmune thyroid issues.
Gotcha. And I always tell my clients, if you're experiencing symptoms and you've been told either you don't get a diagnosis at all, or you've gotten a diagnosis and medicine's the answer, then let's dive in a little deeper. And sometimes you have to ask, can I do an antibody test? Can I look and see if this is autoimmune or not? And not every doctor will do that. So you do have to ask for that, but it's so important. So if you're getting brushed off, keep digging until you figure out what some of those root causes might be. For sure.
I agree completely. Yeah. I think that information is empowering. And I think the best that you can do is ask. And if you get turned down, keep asking, because it's really important.
For sure. For sure. And I know we didn't talk about this, but let's talk about toxins, because I know this is something I see a lot in my practice, where a lot of toxins are, going to trigger thyroid imbalances, even can trigger an autoimmune. So are you seeing that in your practice, where kind of toxins are some of the root cause of this?
Yeah. And I would say, especially with the autoimmune side of things, is that there's almost this trifecta that happens where it's part genetic predisposition, part gut imbalances in some capacity, and part toxin overload. And when I'm teaching clients about what toxins can be, we talk about social toxins like stress and being burned out and, being overcommitted, but also environmental toxins. So whether it's pollution, whether it's birth control, whether it's mercury, whether it's lead, we sort of, I actually use toxins kind of in a broader sense to dig a little bit deeper into what could be stressing the body out, whether it's physical stress and or emotional stress. I oftentimes find that the toxin element, whether it's pollution or, a bad relationship or a trauma, that actually that piece of the puzzle is often what pushes people over the edge to eventually to get that diagnosis. And research even supports that in 80% of cases, it's this uncommon emotional stress, either an acute stressor or a culmination of stress, that's the catalyst to autoimmune development. So it's a really big deal.
For sure. And so you talk about the thyroid hormone journey. Let's talk about that. What do you mean by that? And can you kind of walk us through that journey?
Yeah. And conventionally speaking, a lot of times the focus is just on thyroid hormone production, which is a huge piece of the puzzle. But when you take a step back and you think holistically, like whole body, you have to think about, well, what's helping the thyroid to actually produce the thyroid hormone? And first and foremost, our brain has to trigger our thyroid. And so there has to be a good brain thyroid connection, which is critically important. And things like stress and nutrient deficiencies and inflammation can impair that process of the brain triggering the thyroid. The thyroid then has to produce it. The body has to convert inactive thyroid hormone into active thyroid hormone. Then the hormones have to be transported throughout the body, and then your cells have to take them up, and then your cells have to use the thyroid hormone to create energy. So it's this multi-step process that allows for areas to be a little bit like a misstep to happen, which can seem kind of overwhelming. But I like to flip it and say, well, actually, there's a lot of opportunity to optimize all of these steps. So if you're like, man, I don't know what's going on. I'm taking my thyroid medication or my thyroid hormones look totally normal on my labs, but I'm still feeling all the symptoms. I think that it's actually very hopeful to realize, okay, well, we can work on your brain thyroid connection. We can work on your cells taking up thyroid hormone. It gives us a lot of opportunity to help you feel better by embracing the whole thyroid hormone journey.
I love that. And I love that you start with the brain, because a lot of people don't connect those two. They go straight to the thyroid, but it's actually our brain that stimulates the thyroid. So I love that you say that. And it's so important. And so, and I know we talked a little about this earlier, but let's dive back into testing. What would we start with that? Would we go see an endocrinologist and get some blood work done? Or, would we work with somebody like a naturopath or, somebody that can do some more of these functional tests?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I would say whoever's willing to order the most comprehensive testing on you, that's who I would recommend. For some people, it's their OB-GYN, and for some people, it's their chiropractor. It kind of just depends on who's willing to do it. So I would really recommend starting with a full thyroid panel so that we can at least get an idea of what's going on with that thyroid hormone journey. And from there, you can dig a little bit deeper. And so a full thyroid panel there are different definitions of this, but how I would define that would be looking at a TSH, which is still valuable. It's not invaluable, but I think that it's just part of the puzzle. I like to look at total T4 and total T3 to see overall production. And then I also like to look at free T4 and free T3 to see what's free and available for use. Antibody levels, so the anti-TPO and the anti-TG. I find value in reverse T3. And then I also find value in something called the thyroxine binding globulin, or TBG. So those would be the parameters that through blood work I would love to look at. And then as a dietitian, I focus on food and vitamins and minerals and your metabolism, and your thyroid hormone is what ultimately dictates your metabolism. But in order to use those thyroid hormones, you need cofactors and coenzymes like vitamins and minerals. So kind of the second tier of what I really like to look at would be vitamin and mineral levels to see, does your body have the fuel to produce, convert, absorb, utilize, how we can really support that whole thyroid hormone journey.
I love that. Amazing. And I love that you mentioned metabolism, because I think a lot of people think that thyroid is mainly your metabolism, but talk to me about that. How does metabolism play into the thyroid? But talk to me about why it's not just about your metabolism and it controls so many other pieces in your body.
Oh man, I love the thyroid hormone so much, but man, when it's off, it's super meddlesome. So yes, I think that sort of colloquially understood is that thyroid hormone helps to regulate your metabolism, which awesome. But the thyroid hormone impacts every cell in the body. And so especially when you're thinking about your body in a holistic way, thinking about your brain and your thyroid and how it's also connected to your ovaries and your adrenal glands, like those are constantly communicating all day, every day. So if you think about it sort of like a table with four legs, when you have one leg of the table that's wobbly, the whole system kind of gets a little bit off. And so when your thyroid hormones are off, it can affect your sex hormones, and that can lead to period problems, fertility problems, and things like that. Your thyroid hormones being off can also affect your adrenal hormones. And so that can make you feel like wired but tired, or it can make you feel really, really stressed out. And then the thyroid hormones being off can also affect your brain function and your energy production and just how you're showing up for the day. And so I like to really think of it in a holistic way. And then kind of opposite of that is if your thyroid hormones are great, but maybe your brain is really stressed out and your adrenals are firing overtime and you have some sex hormone imbalances, how are those things affecting your thyroid? And so again, that's where taking that holistic whole body approach is so critical to really support all of your hormones from a foundational level.
Sure. I love that. And we're going to get into the second half of the show and talk how can we use food and lifestyle to optimize our thyroid and our overall fertility and hormone health. But I also want to talk about, we've talked a lot about hypothyroidism and low thyroid function, but let's flip the switch and talk about hyperthyroid, which I know is less common, but I see people in practice with this issue. So talk to us about that, just the basics of what is hyperthyroid, and then when would somebody know that's maybe hyper versus hypo?
For sure. Yeah. So it's definitely less common, but it's still ever present. And it's something that has very, very similar root causes as hypothyroidism. It's just the thyroid gland either being attacked by the immune system. So an autoimmune process. I've actually had a couple of cases where mold was the root cause behind hyperthyroidism. And so just like you would want to dig deeper into the root causes like you would with hypo, the same is true for hyper, which is peeling back the layers and understanding why there's a hyperthyroid situation happening. And so similarly, or I guess not similarly, but like a mirror effect to hypothyroidism, hyper would be too much thyroid hormone coming out and leading to almost the opposite effect, where instead of feeling exhausted and tired and like your metabolism is slow, a lot of times it can lead to the opposite, where you're feeling kind of wiry and frantic energy. The influence on metabolism I found to be very different. So some people, they just shed off weight because of the increases in metabolism. But I've also found in some cases, because hyperthyroidism is such a stressor on the body, sometimes they actually hold on to weight because the body feels so unsafe. So I don't want to say that weight loss is always a symptom, but it can be a common symptom. But I wouldn't hang your hat on that being a symptom of hyperthyroidism.
Sure. And I love that you mentioned mold, because I also see that a lot in my practice. And I feel like it's a hidden trigger that a lot of people miss. Yeah. And so that's one of the questions I'll ask is there mold in your environment that you know of or that you don't know of? And I actually had a case recently where I found mold. We did a mycotoxin report and I found mold on her mycotoxin test, and we linked it back to when she was a baby. She was in a
Oh
house that had
man.
mold in her crib, and her body had stored it for that long. Yeah, because that was the only other place that was like we pinpointed it to. So your
Man.
body can hold on to it. And she never knew that until I said, "Is there mold in your environment?" And she said, "Well, when I was a baby." So it can definitely be
Man.
a trigger. Yeah. So crazy. So love that you mentioned that for sure. And
Yeah.
talk to us too about, some triggers of hyperthyroidism. I know we talked mold, we talked toxins, and we've talked a little bit about this where it can be, something on your thyroid gland that can trigger
Mhm.
this, a goiter. So talk to us about that. Any other triggers other than toxins and mold?
For the hyperthyroidism?
Hyper, yes.
Yeah. So, the autoimmune disease process, would be probably one of the most common ones. And so those triggers would be very, very similar to Hashimoto's. And so even though they're manifesting in a different way, at the root of it, it's going to be very similar, like that trifecta of autoimmunity, where it's heart genetics, very much gut health, and then that toxic exposure. And so from a nutritional therapy standpoint, coming from a dietitian perspective, we want to start there. We can't change your genetics, but we can help to influence how they're expressing themselves. We can do a lot of work on gut healing and managing the immune system and just the ecosystem inside your gut. And then, that awareness of toxins, whether it's, I would say mold is probably one of the most common ones that I've seen with hyperthyroidism. And I'm sure that there are more. I just don't deal with hyperthyroidism very often. And if I have, it's usually related to Graves or in clients who come in that they're just like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just feel like wired but tired and just all over the place. We'll run a panel and then identify hyperthyroidism from there. And so it's almost like an accidental diagnosis, which is scary because it could be really dangerous.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. I love it. And I love this conversation so much, but we do have to take a break. We're going to hear a word from our sponsors. We're going to come back and we're going to talk more practical tips around, we've talked a lot of root cause and things that can trigger the thyroid, but now we're going to talk about, okay, well, what can we do to optimize the thyroid and hopefully put some of this stuff into remission? So we'll be right back. Hey, y'all. It's Dr. Kayla here. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. We'll be back in just a moment, but first, let me share something exciting that I know will make a difference in your fertility puzzle. Hey, lovely listeners. Don't miss the upcoming free Solving Infertility Summit. It's a gathering of top women's health experts from around the globe, all sharing their insights on fertility and hormone health. Visit www.solving-infertility.com to register. I hope you'll join us for this incredible event. The details of this event are in the show notes, so you can easily find them after this podcast. Now, let's jump back into our episode and continue our hormone puzzle journey together. Hey, Nicole, welcome back.
Thanks. I'm still here.
Yes. So let's talk those practical tips. Our audience loves to know, okay, well, what can we do about all of this? So what are your top 5 things that we can do to optimize our thyroid and in turn optimize our fertility?
Yeah. Well, I like to teach that our body is on our side. And when we're having symptoms, whether it's hormonal imbalances or thyroid issues, that's a metabolic adaptation. And our responsibility is to get curious about why. Why is our body metabolically adapting in a way that with hypothyroidism is slowing down our metabolism? And a lot of times it's related to stress inside the body. And that could be physical stressors and or emotional stressors. And from a nutritional standpoint, nutrition is one of those things that touches on both. Nutrition is something that physically sends that message of safety to your body. And it's also something that emotionally makes you feel safe. So when you think about the hierarchy of needs, like at the bare minimum, what do humans need? We need food, shelter, and water. And so we have to make sure first and foremost that our body is being adequately nourished. If our body is not being adequately nourished, meaning you're not eating enough food or maybe not eating at the right times or going really long spans between meals or under eating a certain food group, like not getting enough carbs or not getting enough protein or not getting enough veggies, if there are imbalances in your diet, that is stressful to the body. And so the body and brain, which are on your side, will metabolically adapt by turning down the metabolism, which is dictated by your thyroid. So I would say first and foremost is making sure that you're eating enough food. Then the next question is, well, how do I know I'm eating enough food? And so what I like to teach is sort of an order of operations, because I'm a big believer in following your body's cues and eating when you're hungry and stopping when you're full. And sometimes that could be hard if you've been disconnected for a while. So this order of operations that I like to teach is first and foremost, like your timing of your meals. Can you eat within an hour of waking up? Can you try to have a meal every 4 to 5 hours? And if you know, during wake time, of course, not overnight. But if you know that you're going to be going 8 hours during the day without eating, can you preventatively add in a snack just to make sure that you're not on this blood sugar roller coaster, which is really going to stress your body out? That would be step number one. And then from there, it follows this progression of like, do you have the food groups present on your plate? Do you have veggies and fats and proteins and carbs? Are they nicely balanced? And then the final auditing tool would be the portion size, which is just that. It's an auditing tool that you don't need to be obsessed with, but sometimes it's nice to have a frame of reference for how much protein you should be getting for your body. How many carbs should you be eating? And so what I do as a dietitian is help clients take that theory and turn it into practical application for their lives so that they can adequately nourish their body to send that message of safety and also provide the necessary nutrients to create, convert, absorb, use thyroid hormones. So it really comes down to creating a sense of safety inside the body.
I love that. And I love that you say eat enough, because that's one I talk about a lot. I feel as women, we're so busy, just don't eat enough. And I think we've been inundated to think what is enough, and it's not enough. So definitely eating enough is important, and don't eliminate any food groups. We don't want to eliminate carbs or, I see a lot of people going vegan, and that's fine, but make sure we're getting protein if we're vegan. So I love it. Yeah.
Well, and even, like I've been a dietitian for ages, and like this is my job. And there are just some times where I've accidentally undereaten and didn't even realize it. And so I think it's all about awareness. And then I think the second part of that would be testing, like lab testing, and seeing what your levels are, not just your thyroid hormones, but looking at your vitamins and minerals and just kind of seeing that, maybe your diet is on point. And so it's not a supply of nutrients that's the issue. And maybe it's the demand of nutrients. And so things like stress or inflammation or exercise or having a healing process happening inside the body, that will increase demand for nutrients. And so sometimes there could be a big gap between supply and demand, which can get you into a deficient state. And I know myself, like my diet could have 0 deviations, but if I, have been breastfeeding or I moved or I had a really stressful season, I'll test my nutrients. And even with the same diet, my nutrients come back low because my body's been burning through them. And that will impact your hormones.
For sure. I love that. And I know we talked earlier about stress, but talk to us a little bit about that. We all know that stress affects us, but what are some practical things that we can do as it relates to stress to maybe minimize it and nurture our nervous system?
Yeah. I mean, I tell clients all the time, it's not about having no stress at all, but knowing what your stress is and adjusting accordingly. So if you know that you're going to be, up all night with a sick kid and you have a deadline coming up and you're going to sit in traffic every day, that's probably not the time to start training for a marathon and adopt, a super strict diet. So we sort of have to imagine how much stress is coming in and offload what it is that we can. And so I think that you just have to meet yourself where you are and do what you can. And so for some people, stress management is having fewer obligations, creating more white space in their calendar. As a dietitian, I recommend like really making sure that food is sending that message of safety. So having sometimes even scheduled meal times to make sure that you're not skipping meals and making sure you're eating enough food. Getting to bed on time, belly breathing, man, I feel like a secret power that we all have that is so underutilized. And I have to remind myself of the power of breathing all the time. But I think just finding these opportunities to just remind the body that like we are safe. Our immediate environment is safe. And we have to retrain our subconscious brain to believe that. And that could be hard work.
For sure. I love that. And I love all these tips. We've hit a lot of great ones. We've talked about nutrition. We've talked about stress. One thing that we haven't talked about that I want to touch on is hydration. Talk to us about how important hydration is for overall health, but also the thyroid.
For sure. So if you think about how things travel through the body, they don't just, float in air. They have to travel through a liquid medium. And so that requires that we're adequately hydrated. And so hydrating is not just guzzling down a gallon of water. In fact, I would say that's probably more harmful than helpful. But more than anything, making sure that your cells are properly hydrated, which requires electrolytes, which are minerals. And so minerals are things that we don't make inside the body. We have to get them from food, ideally from beverages as well. And if you think about, before humans had houses with water systems, we were drinking out of streams and rivers and things that had mineral composition to them. But our water is so clean now, thank goodness. Like, we're not getting diseases from our water, but our water is almost too clean, in which it doesn't have the necessary minerals for proper absorption of the fluid. So I would say eating a mineral-rich diet, in some cases, people need additional minerals or electrolytes added to their fluids to help with that hydration. Stress is one of the biggest depleters of minerals, and then a lack of supply is another factor in there to create this kind of mineral insufficiency situation going on. And so again, I think testing is really helpful at identifying where you may have some imbalances or deficiencies that are hindering how well your body is able to hydrate.
Sure, for sure. I love that. And I completely agree. So important to adequately hydrate, make sure your minerals are not imbalanced and you're getting enough electrolytes. So I love all of that. It's amazing. Yeah. And I could talk to you all day, but we do have to start to wrap up. So there's a few things I want to do before we do that. But first, I just want to tell you, thank you so much. You're just
thank you.
Wealth of information, and I know our audience is going to love you. So thank you for being here.
Thanks.
And so a few things I want to do before we close out are, first thing, I want to play a little game. I love to do this because, it gets our audience to know you personally. So it sounds like you're open to that.
I hope I have good answers.
Oh, good. So how it works, I'm just going to ask you a series of questions. You're going to say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Ready? Okay. Favorite food?
Sushi.
Least favorite food?
Liver.
Favorite hobby?
Walking.
One thing you're scared of?
Tornadoes. One
thing that you love?
Being outside.
And a bucket list item?
Ooh, traveling anywhere.
Yeah. I love it. It's amazing. Oh my goodness, Nicole. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Where can everybody find you and learn more about working with you?
Yes, I would say Instagram would probably be the most fun place to connect. And my Instagram handle is Choose Food Wisely, and it's CHEWS, like chewing. Choose Food Wisely.
I love that. And you have a free gift for us. Tell us about that.
I do. Well, we talked a lot about the thyroid hormone journey and just how it presents so many opportunities to really optimize your body and your hormones. And so I have a free masterclass that I'm giving out.
Yay. And we'll have that linked in the show notes. So it's really easy to find, and everybody struggling with thyroid health, I know that's going to be wildly important for that. So for that. Any final thoughts? What do you want to say to our audience as we close out? Any piece of advice you want to leave us?
I would just say, just never give up on yourself, and your body is on your side and your symptoms are telling you a story, and it can be really easy to get frustrated or be confused. But I would say more than anything, approaching your body with compassion and curiosity, and never give up on yourself, and just keep digging.
I love that. Keep digging. I completely agree. Amazing.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been so fun. Thank you again. And thank you to everybody who's listening to this episode of the Hormone Puzzle Podcast. We'll see you next time. Bye for now. Hey, hang on a second before you go. I've got some fantastic free resources waiting for you over at our website, all designed to support your journey. When I was going through my own 2 years of infertility, I wish that there had been something like this to guide me. There just wasn't. And that's why I created these resources specifically for you. And here's a little secret. The strategies and the foods that I share in these resources are the exact same ones that helped me conceive, not once, but twice, even after being told that it wasn't possible. So trust me, I know these tools work. Make sure you check them out. And I can't wait for you to be my next success story. Thank you so much for joining me today. And don't forget to check the show notes of this episode. If you enjoyed our time together, please hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. This would mean so much to me, and it's how more people just like you can find our show. See you next week on the Hormone Puzzle Podcast.